Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to continue a series where I've been talking about various endgame uniques, why you might want to consider using them, and how you can source them. And today I wanted to talk primarily about Replica Voidwalker, but you can't really talk about a replica item without talking about the item that it's based off, because they do actually fill a fairly similar purpose. So I'll also talk about Voidwalker itself. Voidwalker itself drops from the Shaper only, so it's a boss drop, and it's one of the more common of the Shaper exclusive uniques, so it's pretty easy to get your hands on it. Although, of course, you do need to beat the Shaper or trade with someone that's been able to beat him. Now, in terms of the Voidwalker's stats, it gives you a solid chunk of dexterity, which you kind of got to get somewhere. It grants you evasion and energy shield, and a bit of movement speed. It is not a defensive powerhouse item. It has no resistances, no life, and only a small amount of energy shield. So you'll need to keep that in mind. It does have a lot of evasion rating for a set of boots, but it's still not an extraordinary amount. However, Voidwalker then has 20% chance to avoid projectiles while phasing, and it grants you phasing if you've killed recently. Both versions grant you phasing if you've killed recently. Voidwalker grants you the defensive buff of 20% chance to avoid projectiles while phasing. Replica Voidwalker has all of the same basic stats, but then has the drawback of 10% increased damage taken while phasing. That's a pretty serious drawback. That's roughly equivalent to having 1/9 less life and 1/9 less energy shield. So that's a pretty serious drawback on the Replica version, but we'll get to why you'd still consider using the item. Voidwalker, though, has a defensive buff instead. Now, the reason that you would use these, well, partly you get the cool celestial footprints while you're using them, but the main reason you use them is their damage projection mods. These are something that these are very powerful mods that you can get on Voidwalker pretty easily. So Voidwalker, the original, grants you projectiles pierce 5 additional targets while you have phasing, and the Replica Voidwalker has a more powerful mod still, which is projectiles chain +1 times while you have phasing. So, the reason that this is good is that ultimately it's a clear speed multiplier to be able to kill more more weak monsters with one attack, or with one spell, depending upon whether you're playing a spellcaster or a ranged attacker. They're the two sorts of builds that would use these items. Voidwalker grants you the ability to pierce targets. Now, pierces are always used first, and so that means that having Voidwalker on can interfere with other items, other effects that might grant you the ability for your projectiles to fork, or that might grant the ability for your projectiles to chain. However, being able to pierce 5 of them means that if there are 6 enemies in a line, you will hit all of them. If there are 8 enemies in a line, you'll hit the first 6, and then the last 2 will not be hit. That's really powerful when enemies are in a line. That's often not the case, and that's why I feel that Voidwalker, whilst good, is outclassed a little bit by Replica Voidwalker. Replica Voidwalker's projectiles chain +1 times while you have phasing allows you to hit enemies around corners, and also to hit enemies, to hit the stragglers that are just sort of in the wrong spots for your projectiles to directly hit them. This is really powerful, and it will enable you to project damage much more effectively than with other means. For that reason, I'm a big fan of the Replica Voidwalkers despite their significant drawback. So where do you get these items? Voidwalker's original drop from the Shaper, as I mentioned earlier, and is a pretty common drop there. Replica Voidwalkers, though, are a bit easier to source. These can drop in Grand Heist. They can drop in any Grand Heist that has the ability to drop replica uniques, and that is at least zone level 69. I've not seen any that are lower than 69. I'm not ruling out the possibility that you can get them at lower item levels, just that I haven't personally seen any below 69. And they're not even all that rare. This is something that in a trade league, you can probably pick up from day 3 or 4 of a league pretty cheaply if you want to use it, and even with Heist not being as available as it was in the actual Heist League, I don't see any reason that Replica Voidwalkers, unless their rarity has been changed, I don't see any reason that their price won't fall below 10 Chaos in a couple of days. The last thing I want to point out with these, with both of these boots, is that because they are so good and used on many different builds, they are exceptionally good choices to use your Eternal Labyrinth enchants on. And that's because there's always someone wanting to use a Replica Voidwalker or a Voidwalker that has a particularly popular enchant on it, particularly the Critical Strike related ones, but that's not the only one on it that will sell. So if you're in a trade league, definitely consider throwing Eternal Labyrinth enchants onto both Replica Voidwalkers and the original Voidwalkers, and looking to sell those to other players. It does definitely work. Boot enchants often get neglected, but think of it this way. If you were a player that had 20 Exalts to your name and you were looking to upgrade your boots, would you pick up a Replica Voidwalker that wasn't enchanted for 4 Chaos? Or would you pick up one that had the enchant you wanted on it for 1.5 Exalts? At that point, because you've got 20 Exalts behind you, you probably think, oh yeah, I'll spend the extra 1.5 and I'll get something good, rather than something that I'll want to upgrade rather than something that I'll then have. I'll feel like I want to run the labyrinth a few times to upgrade from. I'll skip over that step, let someone else do it for me. And that's why these are pretty good choices to enchant in a trade league. Anyway, I want to keep this one short and sharp. If you've got any comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, I'll leave it there, and I will see you in the Ritual League.